In the 1980s, when money was plentiful thanks to the booming economy of the decade, a war broke out between the major car builders of the world to create the ultimate supercar, utilizing a mixture of the most advanced motoring technology and design prowess to create the fastest production car, leading to an era which brought, within the space of 5 years, models which broke each other's records one after the other, and became the must-have playthings for the super rich, unaware that the economy these cars had basked in was about to implode. The term supercar was first coined with the launch of the 1966 Lamborghini Miura, which took the concept of highly popular Grand Tourers a step further by introducing the power and handling of more racing-orientated sports cars, usually resulting in models which had 2 seats and a mid-mounted V12 engine, creating a perfect mixture of luxury accomplishments and incredible speed. The Miura P400 going on to become the fastest production car in the world with a top speed of 171 miles an hour, and the later Miura P400S attaining 179 miles an hour. While it seemed that Ferrari and Lamborghini were set to start a supercar war in the early 1970s, especially once the wedge-shaped Lamborghini Countach had been released in 1974, the rug was pulled out from under them by the 1973 oil crisis, which promptly sent the price of fuel skyward along with the cost of living, and therefore the idea of purchasing super-luxury, high-performance supercars fell quickly out of vogue, the Countach remaining as essentially the only supercar on sale throughout the remainder of the decade and into the 1980s. By the turn of the new decade, sports car and supercar technology had become incredibly dated, with the likes of the Ferrari Berlinetta Boxer of 1973 and the ever-present Countach now reaching 10 years of age, while essentially continuing to maintain the same 1960s-era mechanics and underpinnings as when they had originally been launched, continuing recessions during the first part of the 1980s due to the 1979 oil crisis, meaning that car manufacturers were forced to keep legacy models in production regardless of their age, hoping that their enduring success would keep these firms ticking over. One car company that was determined to break this mold was Porsche of Germany, who had made a name for itself with the mighty Porsche 911, a low-slung rear-engine sports car that married life-and-death handling and performance with an old-world styling that continued to endure even 20 years after the first examples had been launched, the Porsche company, by 1981, essentially relying solely on this model as attempts to venture away from the 911's successful formula struggled to sell, with the mid-engine Porsche 914 failing to win over customers due to its styling, performance, and perceived lack of exclusivity due to its Volkswagen roots, the front-engine 924 being a capable machine that ultimately didn't match the popular 911, and the 928, as Porsche's first attempt at a Grand Tourer, being a strong car, but one which brought with it complex and difficult mechanics, the combined failure of the 924 and 928 resulting in Porsche's first ever loss-making year for 1981. In response, the company decided it would push the 911 formula as far as they could by creating a machine based on a modified version of its chassis and body shell, while upping the power with the 2.8-litre twin-turbocharged flat-six engine and fitting it with a highly innovative 4-wheel drive and suspension system, the goal being to create a machine that would compete in the extremely popular Group B rally of the World Rally Championship, doing battle against the likes of the Audi Quattro and the Lancia 037. In line with Group B rules, Porsche had to deliver, alongside the rally cars, a minimum of 200 street-legal production examples, as this would avoid larger car firms simply creating an overpowered one-off for the rally stage, and therefore, after a protracted development and a hesitancy by the Porsche management to deliver the model, the resultant Porsche 959 made its debut in 1986, with the regular Porsche 959 Comfort and its 444 horsepower engine reaching a top speed of 197 miles an hour, while the upgraded 508 horsepower 959 Sport topped out at 198 miles an hour, making it undisputably the world's fastest street-legal production car. While the 959 ultimately never made it to the Group B rally it was designed for, with a series of horrendous crashes having caused this type of racing to be banned in 1986, the car was still able to win rallying praise thanks to its appearance in the Dakar Rally, a 6,200-mile race from Paris to the Senegalese capital across the scrub and wastelands of North Africa, the 3 959s that competed in this rally finishing first, second and sixth, and thereby putting this highly innovative machine on the map in terms of must-have luxury sports cars, the initial 200-car requirement of the 959 being expanded to 337 units by the time production ended in 1988, due to its popularity, followed by another 8 bespoke units being constructed in 1992 for a wealthy collector in Macau. The incredible reception of the 959 ultimately led to a response from one of their main rivals, Ferrari, with the four-wheel drive Porsche having outshone their own fastest model, the 288 GTO, thus leading company director Giovanni Razzelli to design a supercar that would beat out the 959 and be released in time for the 40th anniversary of the Ferrari company in 1987, hence the car being dubbed the Ferrari F40, the last model of the firm to be personally approved by founder Enzo Ferrari before his passing in 1988, the F40 taking the exact opposite approach to the Porsche in how it would increase its speed and performance. Rather than relying on high-tech wizardry with adaptive suspension and four-wheel drive, the F40 was essentially a Formula One car for the road, made of the lightest materials and stripping out nearly every one of the internal creature comforts in order to reduce as much weight as possible. The car, unlike other opulent supercars which provided at least a minimum level of luxury, having no power steering, no anti-lock brakes, no hydraulic systems, no air conditioning, no radio, no glove box, no carpets, and no sound insulation, the only feature available to the driver that didn't include the instruments on the dashboard being a fire extinguisher under the driver's seat. Regardless, the F40's fervent pursuit of lightness, combined with its 2.9-litre 8-cylinder twin-turbo engine, presented a car that reached 201 miles an hour, the first production car in the world to break the 200-mile-an-hour barrier, and with its low, sweeping body and bright red paint scheme, the car was an instant cultural icon upon its launch in 1987, entering sales at $400,000 or $910,000 in 2022, although the expense of this machine was a major bone of contention for motoring journalists, as it was seen merely as an attempt by Ferrari to cash in on speculators who would purchase the cars, store them for a year, and then resell them at double their value, only 10% of the F40s sold being used for actual driving, while the remainder were essentially being bought up as cash assets. Regardless of this somewhat questionable practice, the F40 was by far the most iconic car in the world at the time, and from what was meant to be originally a limited production run of only 400 units, the F40 would eventually sell 1,315 examples by the time assembly ended in 1992. The legendary status of this machine reflected in that the car has never depreciated, with last-of-the-line F40s selling for $1.6 million in 1992, while in 2019, the race-ready Ferrari F40 LM was bought at auction for a staggering $5.5 million, a majority of F40 survivors now being the highlight of private car collections across the world. From the F40, the bar for supercar technology and extravagance was pushed further the following year when at the 1988 Birmingham Motor Show, Jaguar entered the ring with a concept car dubbed the XJ220, a strikingly bold machine which incorporated rounded styling and air-smooth curves that made it look a decade ahead of its time, while under the bonnet was a modified version of the controversial Jaguar V12 engine from the XJS Grand Tourer, which would make the car capable of reaching 220 miles an hour. The XJ220 concept having been the brainchild of Jaguar chief engineer Jim Randall, and a small team of Jaguar engineers and designers who had worked evenings and weekends putting the car together over the course of 10 months, as Jaguar had not actually given this project formal approval. Jaguar's entry into the fray of supercars was indeed an unexpected move by a company which had been focusing less on sports cars and more on luxury grand tours and saloons with a performance edge, in the same vein as BMW. The rationale behind the XJ220 being to re-establish the firm as a maker of sports-orientated machines in a manner similar to its golden days in the 1940s, 50s and 60s, with the likes of the XK120, the D-Type, the XKSS and the E-Type. The overwhelmingly positive response of the XJ220 concept in 1988, seeing hundreds of affluent customers place down deposits of £50,000 for the proposed 350 examples to be built at a special factory outside Banbury that was opened by Princess Diana. It was during this period that another surprise entry came in the form of the long-dormant Bugatti, a Franco-Italian car maker which had been one of the most famous builders of Grand Prix races and luxury cars during the 1920s and 30s, but had collapsed following the death of founder Ettore Bugatti in 1947, while seeing only brief revivals in 1955 and 1965. The restarted Bugatti being formed by Italian business magnate Romano Artioli at the instigation of Lamborghini founder Ferruccio Lamborghini, The revived Bugatti company aiming to follow in the forward-thinking mindset of Ettore by creating by far the most advanced supercar ever built at the time. With the assistance of several ex-Lamborghini engineers and designers, Artioli, who was a long-time lover of Bugatti cars and had several in his personal collection, wanted to develop a car built by enthusiasts for enthusiasts, the upcoming model to be fitted with a 3.5-litre quad-turbocharged V12 engine tuned by unique technical solutions in order to deliver the absolute best in performance, while the chassis would be built out of carbon fiber composites instead of regular aluminium, a world first for a production car, and the styling would be delivered through a competition between 4 of the automotive industry's most renowned car designers. Coming under the name EB110, to commemorate Ettore Bugatti's 110th birthday, delivering the car's complex mechanics was surprisingly far easier than it was to develop a finalized external styling for the machine, as budgetary and time constraints meant the look of the EB110 was still being tweaked even up to the last few weeks before the car's official launch, which took place on time on September 15, 1991, at a special ceremony in Paris, the EB110 stealing the title of world's fastest production car from the Ferrari F40 with a top speed of 209 miles an hour, although sales for the car were strictly controlled, as following his mindset of for enthusiasts by enthusiasts, Artioli would have potential customers interviewed to ensure their moral character met his stringent demands, his desire being to have a car that, rather than being a toy for the super-rich like the usual crop, would instead be appreciated by dedicated Bugatti lovers and those genuinely interested in the art of car making. The situation, however, wasn't so rosy over at Jaguar, as following the near bankruptcy of the company in 1988, due to an overstretching of the firm's assets and reliability problems with the XJ40 luxury saloon, leading to hundreds of expensive warranty claims, the Jaguar firm had been bought out by Ford, but during this turbulent financial period, the ambitious XJ220 continued to be developed towards production, although in order to cut costs, the more exuberant aspects of the car, including a 4-wheel drive transmission and a V12 engine, had to be cut back to something more conventional, adopting instead a rear-wheel drive configuration and a turbocharged V6 power unit from the MG Metro R64 rally car. And while the car maintained the winning looks of the original concept, it soon became apparent that this machine was built to such bizarre dimensions that it would be very difficult to drive on regular roads. Nevertheless, even with only a mere V6 engine from a Metro under the bonnet, the XJ220 delivered on the power, attaining a top speed of 212 miles an hour upon its launch in 1992, beating out the EB110 and sending it straight into the pages of history as the fastest production car ever built, the 6-year period between 1986 and 1992 having seen this record beaten 4 times during that period as the Supercar Wars reached their climax, unaware that the very justification for these opulent machines would soon be shattered by forces beyond the whim of the car makers. In 1991, following the invasion of Kuwait by the forces of Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein, a military coalition led by the United States and Great Britain were dispatched to the Gulf region to push back Hussein's armies and liberate the small Kuwaiti nation, the overwhelming might of coalition troops sending the Iraqi invasion team into full retreat, but not before they had set fire to the many oil wells of Kuwait, which supplied a large portion of fuel imports for countries in the West. The result was a massive fuel crisis and subsequent economic recession which gripped the Western world, causing the price of living to skyrocket and even the super-rich to become frugal, while a year later, in 1993, what was known as the Lost Decades recession began in the Far East following a stock market crash in Japan, which caused more economic upheaval and did further financial damage to the stock values of the world's elite, many of whom lost millions overnight, and therefore were no longer willing to place orders for cars which cost between $300,000 and $800,000. For the XJ220 and the EB110, the timing was terrible, as while the EB110 had sold comparatively healthily, despite Artioli's stringent interview process, following the recession their quotas plummeted, made worse by the fact that Artioli himself had lost a fortune when his interests in Japan, as well as his position as a primary importer of Isuzu and Suzuki cars into Italy, collapsed, while in 1995, as the revived Bugatti struggled to find investors to keep the company financially afloat, Ferrari used its massive influence in the Italian motor industry to cut off the supply of new parts destined for Bugatti by contractors, threatening their positions if they did not comply, resulting in Bugatti's bankruptcy on September 23, 1995, with only 139 EB110s built. Jaguar, meanwhile, faced similar problems, as with the economy reeling in the wake of the 1992 recession, customers who had placed down £50,000 deposits in 1988 demanded their money back, as they could no longer afford the £470,000 asking price of the XJ220, using the argument that the V12 four-wheel drive car they'd originally ordered was not the V6 rear-wheel drive machine they were presented with, Jaguar being forced to take their own customers to court for breach of contract, and demanding they buy a car they no longer wanted. The result being that of the 350 cars proposed, only 282 units were ever built, 22 of which remained unsold until 1998, and were essentially given away for less than half the original asking price. With the failure of the XJ220 in 1992, and the protracted demise of the revived Bugatti marque, it appeared that the Supercar Wars had become a victim of the turbulent economic times. That was until May of that year, when a small company based out of Woking in England presented what would become the supercar to beat them all, the McLaren F1, a concept which dated back to the late 1980s and was the brainchild of technical director Gordon Murray, who conceived a brand new supercar and, together with company founder Ron Dennis, assembled a purposeful-looking machine which, in a world first for cars of this class, sported 3 seats, with the driver being positioned in the center while 2 passengers sat either side. Its unusual seating configuration, however, was the least of its many pioneering aspects, being the first production car to use a carbon fiber monocoque chassis, and the first to bring high-tech and expensive materials such as titanium, magnesium, Kevlar, and even gold into its construction, while with the fitting of a 6.1-litre BMW V12 engine producing 618 horsepower, the car was able to attain a top speed of 240 miles an hour, easily trouncing the XJ220, and marching home as the unequivocal fastest production car in the world, a record it would maintain until 2005, when Bugatti, under another revival parented by Volkswagen, introduced the 253-mile-an-hour Veyron, with special edition F1s including the LM, the GT, and the GTR race car, essentially a standard F1 with aerodynamic improvements that went on to claim victory at the 1995 24 Hours of Le Mans. While the construction of supercars didn't end with the economic recessions of the early 1990s, with other models of the time including the Vector W8 of 1989, the Lamborghini Diablo of 1990, and the Koenigsegg CC prototype of 1994, it was the 5 fastest which are remembered the most, as each of them upped the standard for the technology, construction and performance necessary to become the world's fastest production car and a road-going legend.